Hello, and welcome to Transforming Language Education, the vodcast series where we will talk about the future of teaching, inquiry, and advocacy in language education. I'm Jen Crawford.
And I'm Rob Philback. Please like or subscribe if you want to join us in helping to transform language education.
Hello and welcome. Today on the show, we're excited to have Eric Yang. Eric is an ed tech and language consultant and the founder of the Bilingual Lens, an ecosystem of social media platforms for 130,000 English learners and 7,000 enrolled students. He is currently a doctoral student in educational leadership and policy at UBC, and his research interests include second language acquisition and media literacy.
Great, thanks, Jen. This is a first part of a three-part series. In this part, we're going to be talking with Eric about his work in online language education entrepreneurship. In part two, we're going to focus on critical media literacy, an area of Eric's current research. And in part three, we're going to build on his experience to think about improving English language education more broadly. Hi, Eric, and welcome to Transforming Language Education.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for having me, Robert and Jen. It's always a pleasure to speak for SC, which I view as my home away from home. But before I begin, please allow me to offer a land acknowledgement. I would like to acknowledge I'm here today on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people here at UBC. It is through their care of these pristine lands throughout the centuries that I'm able to stay here as a guest in such a tranquil environment and further my academic pursuits. Okay, so thank you guys again for having me. Fire away. What's the first question?
That's great. Thank you for that attribution, Eric. So why don't we just kick it off? What inspired you to start your own English language teaching enterprise?
I think like many things in life, we tend to stumble into these things, at least for me. It definitely wasn't planned. I think at the time I had been working as a curriculum writer and also a lecturer of EAP, English for Academic Purposes. And in these courses, you tend to receive a ton of student questions regarding language features. So the most common type of questions is like the difference between words. What's the difference between decrease, decline, or reduce? Or what's the difference between because, as, since? Because students tend to use their L1 to memorize like groups of words and synonyms. I will also get a ton of grammar questions since grammar is a key focus for the language learning process here. So I started to collect answers to these questions. I would compile, paraphrase, or just write some of these articles online. And then I started posting them on Facebook and WordPress. These articles were quite well received since they're asked by language students all around the world and therefore have value. So creating these posts also made my life easier since I can refer to them every time students ask a question and just send in the link. Eventually, these posts became quite popular, and when you search them in English or Mandarin on Google, you would find my webpage.
So Eric, you were tutoring at this time. So this was sort of your way of making your life as an English tutor simpler, and then that led to bigger things?
I think, I was kind of getting away from the question, but the process is, as a teacher, you have to answer student questions. I was working as a university lecturer at the time, and these notes just made my life a lot easier. And eventually, because I accumulated so much information online that, I thought, might as well turn this into a business. But I only turned it into a business after about 10 years of doing this, because at the time I view myself as a teacher first and foremost, and not as a business person. But most of these resources, in my opinion, should be completely free in the first place because you can find them all over the internet. But students have trouble accessing them because of language restrictions and barriers, or they just don't know the keywords to search.
Yeah.
Digital literacy, right? So I felt they should be completely free, and I would distribute them online. So it's just a desire to share and help students who are struggling, and like we said before, also make my life as a teacher a little easier. And then I just decided to take it one step further and turn it into a sustainable operation.
Well, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about that because when you were here at USC, I knew you as a teacher and a lecturer, and I know teaching online has its challenges. This has been a collective experience that we've all shared during COVID, and many of us who've taught online before and after that, before the pandemic have experienced this. So I'm curious for you, what have you found to be some of the biggest obstacles to being able to continue that effort of maximizing student language acquisition online through these various platforms and formats? Since first and foremost, you're a teacher,
Yeah, thank you. I think for all teachers who are unfamiliar with the hybrid or fully online teaching, as you can clearly see from the pandemic, switching from conventional on-site instruction can be quite challenging. Even using another LMS, for example, takes a lot of time to get used to. An experienced teacher may have years of materials built up in paper, or even more rudimentary LMS like Moodle. Some teachers still have to use Moodle, but when they switch to a new system, much of the information will inevitably be lost, right? So I think it's just this process of taking all the materials we accumulated and adapting to a new learning management system that poses great challenge for many teachers. And digital literacy and even flexibility is always difficult for instructors who are more set in their ways. For students without access or who are unaccustomed to online learning, this situation also exacerbates inequities. And we as teachers have the challenge of finding new ways to address these inequities, which I think poses more challenge to both parties, not only just teachers, but students as well.
So, Eric, you use social media a lot as your sort of platform, as it were. Maybe just why did you choose to use that approach, and sort of how does that help address some of the challenges you experience, or maybe even create more access for some of your students? So, why the choice of using that social media platform or platforms as kind of your medium, as it were?
Well, social media, as we all know, have their pros and cons. I think with social media platform, I'm able to use tech that students are already familiar with, so they don't have to rely on LMS provided by schools, which also come with their own shared problems like user privacies. There have also been criticism of ableist LMS designs, right? I'm not going to name any, but there have been criticism of user privacy issues in LMS. But by using social media, I'm able to frame learning more as a social process and engage students in an environment in which they can easily interact with each other. And I think most importantly, produce knowledge with the tools that they're comfortable and familiar with. There are also pragmatic concerns for me as an online instructor. Designing a LMS is capital intensive, and social media is readily available. And functions like Facebook groups, surveys, audio, video sharing features, they can be easily adapted for educational purposes. So I think there's also an equity aspect of social media that enables me to distribute free information to learners all over the world. And, in some countries, students may also not have constant access to laptops, which most LMS are designed for, but they do have access to mobile devices, which typically already have social media installed. And, there are criticism, of course. Inequity is a big problem. And there is indeed a digital divide in certain regions. Tech and media literacies may also pose additional challenges for students, even when I'm using social media as tools to supplement, not replace conventional instruction. I think I attempted to resolve these problems by using multiple platforms like Facebook or blog materials. So as long as they have some sort of internet access, they would be able to access the materials that I provide.
You know, Eric, this is so helpful. And I think many of our listeners might be inspired by your experience of transitioning from on-ground teacher to someone who has supplemented their work. What is it like to create an e-course from concept to operation and implementation? Could you share that with some of some of our listeners who might be interested in following your footsteps?
Yeah, thank you for that. I first have to say, many people love to hear success stories, but it's usually a long path of trial and error. Most don't focus on the ups and downs.
Yes.
So just to create an e-course and to acquire the skills I need for my business, I had to first work as a curriculum writer to become proficient in course design and publishing. So I would become familiar with graphic design and even the layout, the placement of text and images on text. And then I worked as a lecturer for many years to better understand student needs and how to meet these needs. Next comes technology and becoming proficient in skills like filming, video editing, and using a plethora of online tools. For my first e-course, it was not as successful as my other ones. I sold, I think, only like 400, 500 copies around 2016. I think the problem was that not enough marketing was done. Pricing was also a little difficult for a beginner because you have to balance the salaries of the people you're working for and also the needs of the students, right? I can't go charging them thousands of dollars for an online course when I want to make education free. That's just ironic. And it also depends on timing, right? At the time of my first course, the market wasn't ripe for e-learning, but now it is fully developed now. So now would actually be a good time to push out new courses.
This is so great. Well, I know that our listeners will appreciate this. And, you know, we're at a time, as you said, the market is really ready for more of this kind of thing. So many of the teachers that are listening and that we work with may just want to augment their practice with some of these things. So your experience, I think, or I know, is going to be really valuable as they hear you talk about some of these things. And you know, congratulations, great work on really learning so much and investing so much in developing yourself to be able to do the kind of things that you're doing now. This is really tremendous. So I think that's it. Eric, we want to thank you for joining us. And I'm Rob.
I'm Jen, and we've been talking with Eric Yang. Thank you so much, Eric.
Thank you. Thank you.